Queens of England. Now, as we know that Queen Elizabeth II passed away on 8th of September 2022. So in this video, we will be looking at the 8 queens that Britain has seen on its throne. Now let me tell you that the only way for a woman to ascend to the throne is when the previous monarch had no sons. So now when we see King Charles III's wife Camilla being referred to as the queen, she is actually not a queen in her own rights, but a queen consort, which means that she is a companion and a support to the monarch. So let's begin with this educational film. Empress Matilda. She was sent to Germany at the age of 8, and at 11 she married the 27-year-old Emperor Henry V. And 11 years later, Henry died of cancer. And now Matilda had no children with the emperor and thus had no right to remain at the German court. So Matilda was recalled by her father, King Henry I of England, who arranged her marriage with Geoffrey of Anjou. Now here, Matilda's younger and only full brother, William Adelin, died in the White Ship disaster, where the passengers and crew were all drunk and the ship crashed into the rocks. Henry I had no further legitimate children and nominated Matilda as his heir, making his court swear on the oath of royalty and loyalty to her and her successors. But everyone doubted the ability of a woman to rule. The throne was thus seized by Matilda's cousin Stephen of Blois, who enjoyed the backing of the English church. Matilda and her supporters now came to take the kingdom by force and captured Stephen at the Battle of Lincoln. But the Empress' attempt to be crowned at the Westminster collapsed in the face of bitter opposition that she received from the London crowds. As a result of this, Matilda was never formally declared Queen of England and was instead titled as the Lady of the English. Stephen too had to be set free in exchange for Matilda's brother, who was captured by his forces. And when Matilda died, finally she left her eldest son, Henry II, who was then adopted by Stephen and was eventually made to succeed to the throne. Lady Jane Grey, also known as the 9 Days Queen, was a teenage English noblewoman who claimed the throne of England from 10th July 1553 until 19th July 1553. She was the great-granddaughter of Henry VII. She had an excellent humanist education and a reputation as one of the most learned young women of her days. In June 1553, her cousin Edward VI wrote his will, nominating Jane and her male heirs as successors to the crown, because his half-sister Mary was Catholic, while Jane was a committed Protestant and would support the Reformed Church of England, whose foundation Edward had already led. After Edward's death, Jane was proclaimed Queen on 10th July 1553 and awaited coronation in the Tower of London. Support for Mary grew quickly and most of Jane's supporters abandoned her. Now the Privy Council of England suddenly changed sides and proclaimed Mary as the Queen. Jane was held as a prisoner in the Tower. Queen Mary I. She married her cousin Philip II, King of Spain, and loved her dearly. She was desperate to get an heir to keep throne from her Protestant younger sister Elizabeth. But since his husband was always away, maintaining his own kingdom, this became very challenging. Finally, Mary began to exhibit symptoms of pregnancy, but that was actually a false pregnancy and was actually the uterine cancer. She died at the age of 42 on 17th November 1558. Queen Elizabeth I. She was the Queen of England from 17th November 1558 until her death in 1603. Elizabeth was the daughter of Henry VIII, One of her first actions as queen was the establishment of an English Protestant church, of which she became the supreme governor. As her mother had been beheaded on her father's order, when she was 2, Elizabeth refused to marry and became known as the Virgin Queen. Elizabeth dressed fabulously and would wear fine, attractive makeup. During her reign, the English became wealthier than ever, and the time hence came to be known as the Elizabethan era. The period is famous for the flourishing of English drama led by playwrights such as William Shakespeare and for the prowess of English maritime adventurers like Francis Drake. Queen Mary II. Mary was the eldest daughter of James, Duke of York. Although her father and mother were converts to Roman Catholicism, Mary was brought up as a Protestant at the behest of her uncle, King Charles II. In 1677, she married her cousin William of Orange from the United Provinces of the Netherlands. Her inability to bear the children made the early years of her marriage quite unhappy. But eventually, they became a devoted couple. Mary and William, on April 11, 1689, were crowned the joint sovereigns of England, Scotland, and Ireland. While her husband was directing military campaigns in Ireland, Mary administered the government in her own name, but relied almost entirely on his advice. Now, Mary's death from smallpox at the age of 32 left William as the sole ruler until his death in 1702, when he was succeeded by Mary's sister Anne. Queen Anne. Queen Anne reigned as the Queen of Great Britain and Ireland. Now, Great Britain referred to the union of the kingdoms of England and Scotland. Now, Anne had 17 pregnancies with Prince George of Denmark, of which only 5 were live births, while none of her children survived to the adulthood. The reason was her suffering from Hughes syndrome, due to which her sticky blood couldn't help her babies survive. Now, the successor would be decided on the basis of Act of Settlement 1701. According to which, number 1, no Catholic would ever sit on the throne. Number 2, only and only legitimate children. Number 3, no spouses would ever become kings or queens. Number 4, males would be considered first in the pig. This rule was actually struck down in 2013. So the crown went to George I, and the new German dynasty stepped onto the British stage. Queen Victoria. Queen Victoria's reign was 63 years and 7 months from 1837 till 1901, and it was known as the Victorian era. It was a period of industrial, political, and military change within the United Kingdom, and was marked by a great expansion of the British Empire. And in 1876, the British Parliament voted to grant her the additional title of the Empress of India. After the deaths of her father and grandfather in 1820, she was raised under close supervision by her mother and her controller, John Sindro. She inherited the throne aged 18 after her father's elder brothers died without surviving legitimates. Now, Victoria married her first cousin, Prince Albert, in 1840. Their children married into royal and noble families across the continent, earning Victoria the title of the Grandmother of Europe and spreading hemophilia in European royalty. In 1901, Victoria died a year after she lost her very beloved son, Alfred. And according to her funeral instructions, which she wrote in 1897, she was dressed in a white dress and her wedding veil. Queen Elizabeth II. As we know that Queen Elizabeth passed away on 8th of September 2022, but her reign was of 70 years and 214 days, which is the longest of any British monarch, the longest recorded of any female head of the state in history, and the second longest reign of any monarch in history after Louis XIV. She was educated privately at home and in November 1947 married Philip Mountbatten, a former prince of Greece and Denmark. She was served by 15 prime ministers during her reign, more than any other British monarch, and after her death at 96 is succeeded by her eldest son, King Charles III.